Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, best regards from Geneva, Switzerland, which, as you know, hosts one of the headquarters of the United Nations and its Human Rights Council. It is a privilege and a pleasure for me to address you in my capacity as the President of the Human Rights Council on this very special occasion, the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, which took place in California, where you are right now. I wish I could be with you. Why is it so important to celebrate this day? For a variety of reasons. First, we need to remember under what circumstances and with what purpose in mind the UN was founded. It was born out of war and sorrow, entrusted by the countries of the world to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, and achieve international cooperation in order to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights and the dignity of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations, large and small, to establish respect for international law, and to promote social progress and better standards of living. Today, we pay tribute to those who laid the groundwork for international solidarity and cooperation and created the basis for the multilateral system as we know it today, an asset which we must maintain for future generations. The 75th year history of the UN is a unique story filled with successes, setbacks, and above all, lessons learned. I think we should all consider UN Day as an opportunity to reflect on ways and means for improving the UN machinery at this point in time, which is a difficult one, because no doubt we are at the moment of transition. The United Nations is the cornerstone of multilateral cooperation. You chose this year's event to focus on human rights, one of the three pillars of the United Nations, alongside peace and security on the one hand and development on the other. These three pillars are interlinked and mutually reinforcing like a three-legged stool. Take away one and the other two will not be able to stand on their own. There is no doubt about it, human rights get sidelined when there is a lack of peace and security or of human development. And history has clearly shown us that without human rights, we will never be able to achieve or sustain lasting peace. With these considerations in mind, the United Nations Economic and Social Council established in 1946 the Commission on Human Rights, the first ever UN body tasked with addressing human rights issues and setting international human rights standards. It was to be the main source for the creation of international human rights. Unfortunately, however, political maneuvering got the better of it over the years, and its credibility and reputation declined to such a state that in 2006, upon the recommendation of the then Secretary General Kofi Annan, the member states of the United Nations decided to replace the Commission with the Human Rights Council as we know it today. Its task is to promote universal respect for the protection of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, and to address situations of violations of human rights. It is my great honor this year to serve as the President of the Human Rights Council, which has now been in place for 14 years, discussing and dealing with both long-standing human rights issues and urgent situations. The Human Rights Council is unique in that it provides a platform where human rights experts, states, and civil society come together to debate human rights issues. It is even more unique in that it offers a forum where human rights defenders and victims of human rights violations can tell their stories. All in all, it is a huge year-round machinery involving thousands of people, which produces a tremendous amount of information and recommendations that have an impact well beyond Geneva and feed into policy decisions around the world. Take, for example, the Council's mandate holders. All in all, around 100 independent human rights specialists called special rapporteurs or independent experts, members of fact-finding missions or commissions of inquiry that carry out research and investigations into specific human rights issues around the world or human rights situations in a particular country and report back to the Council on their findings. These mandate holders are often called the eyes and ears of the Council. You can probably guess that they are not always very popular in the countries where they conduct their research. After all, their job is to diagnose deficiencies and to make recommendations on how to redress them. The Council also conducts the Universal Periodic Review, a peer review on the implementation of human rights in each of the 193 member states of the United Nations. This review process is regarded by some as the jewel of the crown. It starts from the idea that no country is perfect and that each of them can be monitored to do better. This is a very useful way of nudging states to embark on sensitive issues. Up until now, every single member state of the UN has participated in the exercise, so it is genuinely universal. As president, I have had the opportunity to see a bit more of the country's inner nuts and bolts and realize what an incredible, complicated, yet invaluable machinery it is. Making progress in the area of human rights can be very slow and very frustrating. You will no doubt point this out when discussing the main subject of this event, which is migration and refugees, against the background of many individual stories and tragedies. But let me tell you that in the long run, one always achieves one or the other success story. Just look at what the Council managed to do over the year on women's rights, which, believe it or not, were not fully recognized as human rights until the Beijing Women's Conference 25 years ago. The Council raised awareness again and again on gender equality, domestic violence, and female genital mutilation, which more and more countries have outlawed over the years. It continuously drew attention to the various human rights aspects surrounding migration, which is one of the megatrends of our time. It has also put a spotlight into human trafficking, one of the most horrifying byproducts of migration. Overseeing the Human Rights Council and ensuring that it is doing its best to fulfill its mandate is never a boring job, but this year has given us challenges that we would never have imagined. We were confronted with the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in spring and are undergoing what many people consider to be a second wave now. I'm happy to say that the Human Rights Council adjusted to this challenging situation. It was the last organization in Geneva to go into lockdown in mid-March and the first to take up its work again in mid-June. We used the time in between to define new ways of working, which were then taken up by other UN bodies. We insisted it was important for the Council to go on serving its mandate in spite of all the difficulties, because the COVID crisis was not only a health emergency and an economic crisis as a consequence, but also a major human rights challenge. It acted as a magnifying glass for existing rights issues, in particular for the vulnerable and marginalized groups of the population. So, for the first time ever, we organized virtual conversations and adopted the first official human rights document of the year by way of a silence procedure, a so-called President's Statement on the human rights implications of the COVID-19 crisis. It requests the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mrs. Michelle Bachelet, to report on a regular basis about the human rights implications of the pandemic, with a view to help building back better, as the Secretary General says. Later on, about 100 resolutions on various human rights issues were adopted by the Human Rights Council. Many of them deal, one way or another, with the focus of this event, migration. Right now, in New York, the General Assembly and its third committee, which focuses on social, humanitarian affairs and human rights issues, are dealing with all these subject matters. It is encouraging to see that work goes on in spite of the pandemic. After all, human rights challenges never take a break either. Unfortunately, the pandemic was not the only challenge we had to face this year. The UN, including the Human Rights Council, is undergoing a major financial and liquidity crisis, a direct result of member states not paying their dues. The Human Rights Council meets 3 times per year. It was around 11 weeks in total this year, not only to hear reports and debate human rights issues, it also makes decisions on how to promote human rights on the ground, for example, by carrying out investigations or providing technical assistance to states. These days, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights is increasingly faced with the situation that its resources do not match the demands. The Council found a workaround to this problem this year and remains steadfast in its commitment to promote and protect human rights. But let us not forget the financial challenge of this 75th year birthday. The world needs the unique multilateral framework the UN offers more than ever. Finally, let me thank you all for your involvement with the United Nations Association of the USA and the Los Angeles chapter. The United Nations Association plays an important role in taking the UN work and the UN message out to the people all over the world. This birthday party is an opportunity to look back on the last 75 years and to look forward, keeping in mind the unfinished agenda. The work on human rights and the respect for the dignity of the human person will never be finished. I appeal to all of you to join us in carrying on for the next 75 years and beyond it for the future we want. I wish you all a very successful and thoughtful UN Day.